The starship glided through the silent dark, carrying Melora and Darren far from Verathis for weeks. They traveled from one star system to another, searching for a place that would welcome them. They visited colonies built by humans, but many of them looked at Melora with caution. She was taller than most, her skin touched with the faint shimmer unique to her people, and her eyes held the deep glow of Verathis royalty and human markets. Children stared with open curiosity, but adults sometimes stepped aside, unsure if they should smile or keep their distance. They visited alien worlds as well, but those places had their own unspoken rules. Some saw their union as strange, others as dangerous. Melora quickly learned that love, though powerful, was not always understood beyond the walls of a home. Finally, they found a quiet colony on the edge of a green world called Ondara 4. It was a small settlement built on the shores of a deep blue lake. The air smelled of pine, and the sky was wide and clear. People here were too busy working the land to question where strangers came from. Darren found work repairing farming machines and transport shuttles. He had a steady skill with tools, and soon, the settlers began to call for him whenever a harvest machine broke or water purifier failed. Melora, though once a queen, learned to plant seeds, tend gardens, and help in the local learning hall. Children there did not care about politics. They only wanted to hear her tell stories about the crystal towers of Verathis and the creatures that flew in the skies of her homeland. At night, she and Darren would sit on their small porch, watching the moons rise over the lake. The air would be cool, and the stars would shimmer in the water's surface. Sometimes, Melora missed the soft music of the palace gardens and the scent of the silverleaf trees that grew in Verathis courtyards. But when she looked at Darren's face in the pale light, she knew she had chosen the right path. A year after they settled on Ondara 4, Melora gave birth to their daughter. They named her Lena, a name simple enough to belong to both worlds. From the moment Melora held her, she felt something even stronger than the bond she had shared with her people, an unbreakable promise to protect the small life in her arms. Lena grew quickly. She had Darren's warm brown eyes and Melora's silver touch. Hair. She could climb trees with the agility of a human child and see in the dark as clearly as her mother. The settlers adored her. In the market, she would run from stall to stall, helping carry baskets or delivering messages, her laughter echoing in the open square. Years passed quietly. Melora and Darren built a simple home of wood and stone. They decorated it with woven cloths Melora made herself, their patterns inspired by Verathis designs. Darren kept a workbench in the back where he repaired engines, while Melora tended a garden that seemed to grow larger every season. But life, as Melora knew from her years as queen, could change without warning. When Lena was 20, she fell in love with a young starship engineer named Kale. He was gentle, curious, and always eager to learn about different worlds. Melora recognized in him the same open heart that had drawn her to Darren. She gave her blessing, though she could see a familiar story beginning to form to people from different places. Bound together by choice, Lena and Kale married under the open sky by the lake, with the whole colony gathered to celebrate. Not long after, Lena told Melora and Darren that she was expecting her first child. The news filled the small home with joy. Melora found herself weaving tiny blankets and telling the unborn child stories as if he could already hear her. But that joy was shadowed by the first signs of Darren's illness. It began with small things. He would tire quickly or lose his breath after simple work. At first, he brushed it off, saying he had simply been working too much. But as the weeks passed, the signs grew worse. Melora stayed at his side, caring for him with patience and quiet strength. She never spoke of fear in front of him, but when the night was deep and silent, she would sit alone, staring at the dark water of the lake, feeling a weight in her chest she could not name. By the time Lena gave birth to a boy named Aaron, Darren could no longer work. He held the baby in his arms with trembling hands, his eyes shining with pride. "He has your eyes," Darren whispered to Melora, "and your courage." For a while, it seemed Darren's condition had slowed, but the truth was harder. His strength was fading. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills. Darren asked Melora to walk with him to the edge of the lake. They sat there in silence for a long time before he spoke. "I want you to promise me something," he said quietly. Melora turned to him, her heart heavy. "Anything. If I cannot be here to protect you and Lena and Aaron, promise me you'll keep them safe. Promise me you won't close yourself away from the world." She took his hand, holding it tightly. "I promise." Darren smiled faintly, the lines around his eyes soft. "You were never just a queen, Melora. You were always more. You gave up your crown for love. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen." Not long after that night, Darren's illness claimed him. The colony gathered by the lake to honor him, lighting lanterns that drifted across the water. Melora stood between Lena and little Aaron, holding their hands as the lights disappeared into the darkness. Life after Darren's passing felt emptier, yet Melora stayed strong for her family. She helped Lena care for Aaron, telling him stories of the stars, of the father he would one day meet in dreams, and of the homeworld of Verathis where crystal towers touched the clouds. It was during one quiet evening, while Melora was watching Aaron play with wooden blocks, that a small ship landed on the far side of the lake. From it stepped a messenger wearing the formal crest of Verathis. The man bowed deeply. "Queen Melora," he said, though she had not heard that title spoken to her in decades. "The High Council requests your presence. The throne of Verathis stands empty, and the people remember your name." Melora's heart stirred. She looked at Aaron, then back at the messenger. She had left her world for love, but perhaps now fate was calling her back, not for herself, but for the child who carried both worlds in his blood. The night after the messenger's arrival, Melora sat alone on the porch of her small wooden home. The moonlight silvered the quiet lake, and the stars above looked like 1,000 watchful eyes. Inside, Lena was putting Aaron to bed, his soft laughter drifting out through the open window. Melora's mind was restless. She had thought her days of standing before councils and making decisions for whole worlds were over. But now Verathis had called to her again. The thought filled her with both unease and a strange sense of duty. The messenger's words echoed in her mind. "The throne stands empty. The people remember your name." When Lena stepped outside, she leaned against the porch rail, watching her mother with careful eyes. "You're thinking about going, aren't you?" Melora sighed. "I don't know yet. It has been many years. I don't even know what the council truly wants from me. They may not want me to rule. Perhaps they want me as a symbol to calm unrest." Lena crossed her arms. "And you think they'll welcome Aaron? A child who is both human and Verathis, that," Melora admitted, "is the question." The next day, Melora met again with the messenger, whose name was Kalen. He was young, with the formal manners of the palace, but the steady tone of someone who had seen more than just the royal halls. He explained what had happened. "After you left, the elders placed Regent Corvin in power. At first, the people accepted him, but over time, his rule became cold. The council is divided. Some want to return to the royal line. Others want to keep the regent, but unrest grows. The outer provinces have begun to refuse his orders. Trade routes are closing. The people whisper that the last true queen could bring peace again." Melora listened quietly. She could almost see it in her mind, the crystal towers of Verathis dimmed by tension. The marketplaces filled with hushed voices, the air heavy with distrust. "And you?" she asked Kalen. "Do you believe I should return?" Kalen hesitated. "I believe the people need someone they trust. And many still speak of the queen who left her crown for love." Melora's gaze drifted to the door of her home, where Aaron peeked out shyly. The boy was only 3 years old, yet he already carried a spark of curiosity in his eyes that reminded her of Darren. "I cannot leave him behind," she said. Kalen nodded. "Then bring him. But understand Verathis has never had an heir of mixed blood. Some will see him as a bridge between worlds. Others will see him as a challenge to our ways." That night, Melora told Lena her decision. "I will go," she said simply. Lena looked down at Aaron, who was playing with a carved wooden ship on the floor. "If you take him there, you must be ready to protect him from more than just politics. People can be cruel when they don't understand." "I know," Melora said. But I will not let fear shape his life. If he is to inherit both his worlds, he must see them. 2 days later, Melora's belongings were packed into a small silver shuttle provided by the messenger. The entire colony gathered at the lake to see them off. Old friends embraced her, some with tears, others with quiet blessings died as the engines warmed. Melora stood for a moment looking at the water, remembering the life she had built here humble, but filled with love. Then she stepped aboard with Aaron in her arms. Lena stood at the foot of the ramp, her eyes shining. I'll come when I can. Lena promised. You'll always have a place with me, Melora replied. The shuttle rose into the sky, the green forests and blue lake shrinking. Below, Aaron pressed his small hands against the window, watching the world fade into clouds. Melora watched him, wondering how he would remember these moments when he was older. Their journey took them through several star systems. They stopped at refueling stations where traders spoke in dozens of languages. Some looked at Melora with curiosity, recognizing the shimmer in her eyes as Varathus-born. Others glanced at Aaron and whispered. One evening, as the shuttle drifted in the darkness between worlds, a shadow appeared on the scanner. A long, narrow ship emerged from the void, its surface painted in dark patterns. Kalen's expression tightened. Pirates, he said. Melora's pulse quickened. Are they after us? Perhaps, or perhaps they just want to see what we carry. The pirate ship hailed them, its captain's voice rough through the calm. Travelers, prepare to be boarded. Kalen's hands moved over the controls. Voice calm. We are on royal business for Varathus. You will not interfere. A low laugh came in reply. Royal business? That makes you more valuable. Melora glanced at Aaron, who was clutching her sleeve. She knelt beside him, keeping her voice soft. Stay here, little one. No matter what happens, you do not move. The pirate ship moved closer. But before it could latch onto them, the sleek vessels appeared from hyperspace. Their hulls shone with the silver crest of the Varathus defense fleet. The pirates, seeing they were outmatched, vanished into the void as quickly as they had come. Kalen let out a slow breath. The council sent an escort to meet us sooner than I expected. Melora settled back in her seat, holding Aaron close. Then perhaps they do truly wish for us to arrive safely. The escort ships guided them the rest of the way. When they finally approached Varathus, Melora felt a pang in her chest. The sight of her homeworld after so many years was almost too much to take in. The twin suns shone on wide rivers, green valleys, and the gleaming towers of the capital. From above, it looked unchanged, but she knew that beneath that beauty, tension waited. The shuttle descended toward the palace landing platform. Crowds had gathered beyond the gates, murmuring as they caught sight of her stepping out, holding a young child with human features. Melora stood tall, though inside her heart raced. Aaron buried his face against her shoulder, overwhelmed by the noise. From the top of the palace steps, Elder Theron awaited her. He was older now, his hair silver, his eyes softer than she remembered. Beside him, Regent Corvin stood, his expression unreadable. Queen Melora, Theron said, bowing slightly. Welcome home. Melora inclined her head. I return as you asked, but I bring with me my grandson. Aaron, a murmur ran through the watching crowd. Some faces showed curiosity, others disapproval. Melora met their gaze without flinching. For the first time in many years, she stepped into the palace, feeling the weight of her past and the uncertainty of her future. Somewhere deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning of the real challenge, and as she walked the long marble halls, Aaron's small hand clinging to hers, she silently promised that nothing, not politics, not tradition, not fear would separate them. The palace had not changed much since the day Melora left. The crystal towers still reached toward the twin suns, and the marble floors still shone like water. But to her, it felt different. The air seemed colder, the halls quieter, as if the building itself was waiting to see what she would do. Aaron stayed close to her side as they walked through the grand entrance. His small eyes moved from the tall windows to the painted ceilings, his head turning slowly to take in the strange and beautiful place. He had never seen such space and light indoors. They were led to a private meeting room near the council chamber. Elder Theron entered first, leaning on a carved staff. Regent Corvin followed. His posture straight and his eyes sharp as glass, Melora stood with Aaron beside her. She could feel the tension between the two men even before a word was spoken. Queen. Melora, Theron began, his voice calm but carrying a deep weariness. You know why we have called you back. The throne is without a true ruler. Regent Corvin has kept order, but the provinces grow restless. There's talk of rebellion. Corvin's voice was smooth, but his tone carried steel. Some believe your return will calm the people. I am not convinced. You left them, Melora. You turned your back on Verathis. I did not turn my back on my people, she replied evenly. I turned my back on a council that refused to see beyond old customs. Corvin's eyes flickered toward Aaron, and you returned with him. Aaron felt the weight of the man's gaze and pressed closer to Melora. She rested a hand on his shoulder. Yes, this is my grandson, Aaron. He carries both my blood and that of my human family. Tharn's eyes softened. We know that people will have questions. Some will see him as a sign of unity, others as a break from tradition. But we cannot deny what he is. The next in your line. Corvin stepped forward, his voice low. If you intend for him to be named heir, you must understand he will face resistance. Some will never accept him. They may turn their doubt into something dangerous. Melora met his gaze without flinching. Then it is my duty to prepare him, to show the people who he is and why he matters. Theron nodded slowly. The council has agreed to hold a public ceremony in 3 days. Time, you will stand before the people, and Aaron will be introduced. If the crowd receives him warmly, it will strengthen your position. If not, it will be difficult to argue for his future. Melora understood the unspoken meaning. If the people rejected Aaron, the council could use that as a reason to push him aside. After the meeting, she and Aaron were given rooms in the east wing of the palace. The chambers were large and filled with fine fabrics, carved furniture, and tall balconies. Aaron wandered the room with wide eyes, touching the smooth marble walls and running his hands over the carved wooden chairs. That evening, as they sat near the balcony, Aaron looked up at her. Grandmother, why do they look at me like that? The man with the cold eyes didn't smile. Melora took a deep breath. Because you are different. Some people don't understand different. But different is not bad. It can be strong, and it can be special. You have two worlds inside you, and that is something to be proud of. Aaron nodded slowly, though she could tell he didn't fully understand yet. The next 2 days were filled with preparations. Palace tailors made clothes for both Melora and Aaron, weaving fine fabrics that shimmered faintly under the light. Guards were posted outside their rooms, not only for protection, but also to show the people that the former queen had returned. Under the council's watch, Melora spent hours walking with Aaron in the palace gardens, teaching him the names of the plants and creatures from Verathis. She wanted him to feel connected to this place, to see it not as a strange palace, but as a part of his story. On the evening before the ceremony, Theron visited her privately. Melora, he said, I know the council can seem divided, but there are some who believe in you and in the boy. If you can win the people's hearts, it will be harder for Corvin to oppose you. But remember, crowds can be unpredictable. I understand, she said. I have faced crowds before, but this time I did not stand for myself alone. The morning of the ceremony came quickly. The palace square was already full by the time Melora and Aaron stepped out onto the great balcony. The air was alive with murmurs, the crowd stretching as far as she could see. Flags bearing the crest of Verathis hung from the towers, and the sound of drums echoed through the streets. Melora stood tall, dressed in deep blue robes that caught the light like water. Aaron stood beside her in a silver tunic, his small hand gripping hers tightly. Tharun stepped forward to address the crowd. People of Verathis, today you witness the return of Queen Melora, who once ruled with wisdom and left in the name of love. She returns now, not to take from you, but to bring something new. This is Aaron, her grandson. He carries the blood of Verathis and of the stars beyond. In him lies the hope of unity. A wave of voices rose from the crowd, some cheering, others. Murmuring in doubt, Aaron glanced up at Melora nervously, but she smiled and guided him forward. She knelt beside him and whispered, "Do you see the children in the front? Go and greet them." Aaron hesitated, then stepped toward the railing where a group of young Varathas children stood with their parents. He reached out his hand. One of the children, a girl with bright green eyes, stepped forward and touched his fingers. The crowd quieted. Then, slowly, cheers began to rise. More children came forward, and Aaron laughed as they touched his hands and showed him small flowers they had brought. Melora watched the change ripple through the crowd, their faces softening, their voices lifting. Even those who had looked doubtful were beginning to smile. Behind her, Corvin's expression was unreadable, but she caught the faint tightening of his jaw. She knew he had hoped for a different outcome. When the ceremony ended, the people were still talking, their voices carrying a note of hope. Melora led Aaron back inside, her heart lighter than it had been in years. For the first time since she returned, she began to believe that her grandson might truly have a place here. But in the shadows of the council halls, not everyone was ready to accept him. His ship's silver comet floated silently in the dark sea of space from the wide window of her cabin. Melora looked out at the stars. They seemed endless, stretching far beyond sight. Like the years she had spent away from her homeworld, she held little Aaron in her arms. The baby was sleeping peacefully, his small chest rising and falling. His skin was soft and pale like his human grandfather's, but his eyes when open shone with the deep violet of Varathas. Melora often wondered if those eyes would one day win the hearts of her people or remind them of the choice that cost her the throne. The journey from the colony world to Varathas was not short. They would stop at 3 stations along the way, each in a different system. Melora had chosen this route because it was safer, though slower. She knew she could not risk danger, not for Aaron's sake. The first stop was Care Station, a busy hub where merchants traded goods from dozens of worlds. As Melora stepped out with Aaron wrapped in a warm cloth, she felt the eyes of strangers on her. Some looked curious, others cautious. An old merchant, with scales that shimmered like silver coins, recognized her. "Queen Melora," he said softly, bowing his head. "I'm no queen now," she replied with a gentle smile. "Just a traveler." The merchant's eyes fell on Aaron. "Is this your heir?" Melora did not answer directly. "This is my grandson. He is my heart." The merchant studied the child's features for a moment. Then, to Melora's surprise, he smiled warmly. "He has a peaceful face. Perhaps he will bring peace where others brought division." His words stayed with her long after she left the market. Perhaps there were still those who believed in her family. Their next stop was Rinvar Outpost, a small station on the edge of an asteroid belt. Here, the people were less welcoming. Melora kept to herself, buying food and fuel for the ship. Whispers followed her as she walked. "That's her," someone muttered. "The queen who chose a human. She's bringing that human child to Varathas," another voice said, low but sharp. Melora kept her head high, pretending she didn't hear. But inside, she felt the old wound reopen. She remembered the day the council had stripped her of her crown, the way the crowd had turned their faces away. Back in her cabin, she looked at Aaron sleeping in his small bed. She spoke softly, more to herself than to him. "You will hear their whispers one day, little one. But you must walk with your head high, as your mother and I did. You are not less, you are more." The final stop before Varathas was Zerith Port, a large and colorful city floating in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant. Here, the mood was different. The people were used to travelers from all corners of the galaxy, and no one stared too long while waiting for the ship's maintenance. Melora took Aaron for a walk through the crystal gardens. Towers of shining mineral rose around them, glowing faintly in the light. Aaron reached out with tiny fingers to touch one of the crystals, his violet eyes wide with wonder. A young Varathas guard approached, wearing the silver armor of the royal fleet. "Your Majesty," he said respectfully, kneeling slightly. Melora was taken aback. "How do you know me?" "I trained under Commander Yaren," he said. He often spoke of the day you defended the border worlds from the Zayla raids. He said you fought with both wisdom and heart. Melora felt a rare warmth in her chest. Those were different times. The guard looked at Aaron. If this is your heir, perhaps such times can return. Melora thanked him, but as she walked away, she felt the weight of those words. If this was her heir, the future of Vrathis might depend on him. The final stretch of their journey was quiet. The silver comet glided through the dark, guided by the star charts Melora knew so well. At night, when Aaron was asleep, she would stand by the window and think of the palace. She remembered the throne room, with its tall glass walls that caught the light of the twin suns. She remembered the sound of the council chamber, voices rising and falling in argument, and she remembered the long walk to the gates, the day she left for exile. Now she was returning, not as a ruler, not even as a citizen, but as a grandmother carrying a child who might change the course of two worlds. 3 days later, the ship finally reached the Vrathis system from afar. The planet shone like a jewel, blue seas, green continents, and the silver glint of its great cities. Melora's heart beat faster. She had dreamed of this view for years, but now it felt different. She was not returning for herself, but for the little life sleeping in her arms. As they entered the atmosphere, the clouds parted to reveal the capital city. Spires of white stone and glass rose toward the sky, surrounded by wide gardens and the great river that cut through its heart. The silver comet landed on a private platform near the palace. A line of guards waited, their armor gleaming in the sunlight behind them. The tall gates of the palace stood open for the first time in many years. Melora stepped onto the landing platform, holding Aaron close. She could feel the eyes of the guards on them, measuring, questioning. She walked forward with steady steps. This was the beginning of something new. She did not know if it would end in welcome or rejection. But she knew one thing: she would face it without fear. For Aaron's sake, for her daughter's sake, for the chance that two worlds might one day stand together. The great doors of the Vrathis palace opened with a slow, deep sound. Melora stepped inside, holding Aaron's small hand in hers. The marble floor gleamed beneath their feet, reflecting the light of the high crystal chandeliers. The hall smelled of polished stone and fresh flowers from the palace gardens. Aaron's eyes widened at the tall columns and the grand paintings of past queens and kings that lined the walls. He was silent, clutching his grandmother's hand tightly, feeling both excitement and fear ahead. In the large council chamber, the elders waited. Elder Theron sat in the middle, his silver hair falling over his shoulders and his eyes kind but serious. Beside him stood Regent Corvin, his sharp gaze fixed on Melora and the child, Queen Melora. Theron greeted with a respectful nod, and this must be Aaron. His voice was gentle, but carried the weight of the council's authority. Melora inclined her head. Yes, this is my grandson, Aaron. He carries the blood of Vrathis and that of our human allies. The council members murmured softly among themselves. Some faces showed surprise, others skepticism. A few younger members looked curious, but the older elders remained guarded. Corvin stepped forward. The council must discuss how this child fits into our traditions. The people of Vrathis have never accepted an heir who is not of pure Vrathis blood. There will be many who oppose his claim. Melora's gaze met his steadily. Change has always been difficult, Regent, but this child represents a future where our worlds are not divided by fear, but joined by hope. One elder, a woman with sharp eyes named Alira, spoke up. How can we trust that Aaron will honor Vrathis customs? He has grown away from our lands. Melora smiled gently. I will teach him. I have brought him here so he may learn our ways, our history, and our people, and in time, he will show you all that he is more than a symbol. Aaron looked up at the elders. His small voice surprised everyone as he said, I want to help Vrathis. I want to be strong like my grandmother. A quiet ripple passed through the room. The elders exchanged looks. The child's words, innocent and honest, softened some of the tension. Theron nodded slowly. Very well, we will give Aaron time to grow in our ways. But you, Melora, must be prepared for challenges. There will be those who resist. Melora's hand squeezed Aaron's gently. I am ready. As the meeting ended, Melora was led to a private chamber where she could care for Aaron and rest. She watched him sleep peacefully, his small hands curled like the first stars of the evening sky. Though the council had welcomed them for now, Melora knew the path ahead would not be easy. Outside the palace, whispers spread quickly. The people of Verathis were curious, but cautious about the child who was part human and part queen. Some saw him as a hope for peace, while others feared what change might bring. Melora spent the days walking through the palace gardens with Aaron. She told him stories of their ancestors and showed him the plants that grew only on Verathis. Aaron listened, his eyes shining with wonder and pride. One afternoon, while visiting the marketplace, Melora and Aaron were approached by a group of children. They smiled shyly and offered Aaron small gifts: a carved wooden bird, a flower with silver petals. Aaron accepted with a shy smile. For the first time, Melora felt the true possibility of unity between their peoples. But not everyone was pleased. Regent Corvin gathered with his allies in the council chambers. Their voices were low but filled with unease. How can we allow this? A child with human blood to sit in the line of succession? One elder whispered. Corvin's face was hard. If the people do not accept him, we must be ready to act. Tradition is the foundation of our strength. Another elder nodded. Perhaps we should test the boy. See if he has the wisdom and courage to lead. Corvin smiled thinly. Exactly. Let the people see what he is made of. That evening, Melora received a message from the council. Aaron was to be presented in a public ceremony, a test of the people's acceptance. Melora understood the meaning. This was more than a ceremony, it was a challenge. She knelt beside Aaron, looking into his bright eyes. Tomorrow, you will meet the people of Verathis. Remember, be kind and brave. I will be with you every step. Aaron nodded, hugging her tightly. The next day, the palace square was filled with people. Banners flew in the wind, and the sound of music filled the air. Melora and Aaron stood on the balcony overlooking the crowd, Aaron's small hand held tightly in hers. He looked out at the faces below, some smiling, some doubtful. Taking a deep breath, Melora stepped forward. People of Verathis, this is Aaron. He is our future. The link between two worlds. I ask you to see him not as a child of different blood, but as a child of hope. Double quotes. Aaron, encouraged by his grandmother, waved shyly. Children near the front smiled and waved back slowly. The crowd began to warm. Cheers grew louder. Aaron's courage had touched their hearts. That night, as the palace grew quiet, Melora stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. The future was uncertain. But in Aaron's eyes she saw a light strong enough to face any darkness, and she knew their journey was just beginning. The sun rose over Verathis, casting warm light on the crystal towers and marble streets. For the first time in many years, the city felt alive with hope. The air buzzed softly with the whispers of change, and people gathered in the streets, eager to witness a new beginning. Melora stood on the balcony of the palace, her heart steady but full of emotion. Aaron stood beside her, taller now and more confident. His violet eyes scanned the crowd below, where faces both familiar and new looked up to them. Today was the day Aaron would be formally recognized by the council, and the people as the rightful heir to the throne. The ceremony would mark a turning point, not just for their family, but for all of Verathis. Melora remembered the long journey that had brought them here, the exile, the quiet years in a distant world, the journey home, and the challenges faced along the way. Each step had tested their courage, but also their love. As the crowd quieted, Elder Theron stepped forward. His voice carried across the square, steady and clear. People of Verathis, today we stand at the edge of a new era. Aaron carries the blood of our ancestors in the spirit of the worlds beyond. Let us welcome him with open hearts. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Aaron stepped forward, his head held high. He spoke simply, but with a clear voice. I promise to serve Verathis with honor and kindness. I will learn your ways and protect our future. Melora's eyes filled with pride as she watched her grandson speak. The people's cheers grew louder, echoing between the towers. Among the crowd, Melora saw Regent Corvin standing apart, his face unreadable. Yet even he did not raise objection to day. After the ceremony, the palace halls filled with celebration, music played softly, and laughter echoed in the grand rooms. Melora took Aaron's hand as they walked through the gardens, beneath the twin suns. "You have done well," she said softly. Aaron smiled. "I could not have done it without you." "Grandmother," she looked at him with deep love, "this is just the beginning. There will be challenges, but together we will face them." In the following weeks, Aaron began his lessons with the council scholars. He learned the history of Varathis, its traditions, and the duties of leadership. Melora watched as he grew stronger in knowledge and confidence. Some in the council still whispered doubts, but more began to see the hope Aaron represented. One evening, as Melora walked the palace gardens alone, Elder Theron joined her. "You have done well, Melora. Your strength has brought peace to this place." She smiled gently. "It was not just me. It was love and the hope for a better future." Theron nodded. "The people will remember this day as the dawn of unity." Melora looked up at the stars, shining brightly overhead. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. Her family, her people, and the worlds they connected were ready to face tomorrow together. Rian stood at the large window of the human embassy on Kestrin Prime, looking out at the busy streets below. This city never slept from this height. The view was a river of lights, hovering vehicles gliding between tall glass towers, street markets glowing with holographic signs, and 1,000 different alien languages floating through the air. He wasn't here to admire the scenery. Somewhere in this crowd, a thief had stolen something Earth could not afford to lose: the quantum core, small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, but powerful enough to power a fleet of starships or disable an entire defense grid. If it ended up in the wrong hands, it could spark a war. The embassy's briefing had been short and sharp: find the thief, recover the core, discreetly. Rian preferred missions where the target was loud, reckless, easy to follow, but this one was different. The suspect was careful, trained, and unknown. The only lead came from surveillance footage: a hooded figure slipping through a security gate. Without triggering any alarms, he tapped the side of his wrist communicator. "Control, this is Rian. I'm heading into the East Sector. Any new sightings?" Voice answered in his ear, calm and efficient. "Negative. Last movement detected near docking bay 12. Be careful, intel suggests our suspect might not be human." That didn't surprise him. Kestrin Prime was a crossroads for dozens of species. Humans were a minority here. Most locals barely gave Terrans a second glance. Still, a skilled alien spy would blend in even better. Rian left the embassy and stepped into the flow of the crowd. His black jacket was plain, without markings, and his boots were made for quick movement. He moved like any other visitor, hands in pockets, eyes scanning the markets and street corners without looking too interested. Vendors called out from stalls selling strange fruits that shimmered under the neon lights. A street performer juggled glowing spheres while a pair of insectoid guards watched from the corner. The air smelled faintly of metal and spice. He walked past a holo screen showing the latest trade routes, but his eyes stayed sharp. He was looking for something subtle: a posture to still, a step to measured. Someone moving like they knew they were being hunted. And then he saw her. At first, she was just part of the crowd, moving with quiet confidence, a long hood shadowed her face. But something was off. Her steps didn't match the rhythm of the crowd. She didn't stop at any stall, didn't look at signs, didn't make a single unnecessary movement. Every step was purposeful. Rian slowed, letting a family of tall, fur-covered merchants pass between them. He followed at a steady distance, careful not to let his gaze linger too long. She turned into a narrow side street. The lighting there was dim, only a few flickering signs marking small workshops and repair shops. He followed. The woman glanced briefly over her shoulder. It was quick, almost casual, but Rian caught it. A train moved, checking for a tail. Without making it obvious, she quickened her pace. Rian moved faster, pretending to be just another pedestrian trying to get somewhere. His boots were silent. On the metal walkway, the sound of distant machinery echoed between the walls. At the end of the street, she entered a small docking bay. The heavy door slid shut behind her. Rian reached it seconds later. It wasn't locked, strange for a private bay. He stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of engine fuel. A few small ships sat in their landing spaces, most of them dusty and unused. He scanned the area, his hand resting on the grip of his compact scanner. Footsteps echoed. She was standing on the far side of the bay, near a small silver shuttle. Her hood still covered most of her face, but now that they were alone, she didn't move away. She stood perfectly still, watching him approach. Rian stopped a few meters away. "You've been hard to find," he said quietly. The woman tilted her head, just slightly. "And yet you found me." Her voice was calm, without any hint of panic. It carried a strange accent, smooth, measured, like someone who had practiced. "Speaking Terran, you have something that belongs to us," Rian said. She didn't answer. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the hum of the docking bay filling the silence. Finally, she reached up and pulled back her hood. Rian had expected fear, or at least surprise, but her expression was unreadable. She was young, though it was hard to tell her exact age. Varens aged differently from humans. Her skin had a faint silver sheen under the light, and her eyes were clear and steady. Watching him with quiet curiosity, "I know what you're looking for," she said. "But you're wrong about me." Rian kept his stance steady. "You're the one in the footage. You left the embassy's secure zone the night the core vanished." "Yes," she said simply, "because I was stopping someone else from taking it." The claim was bold. Rian didn't trust it. "Not yet, if that's true," he said slowly. "Then you'll have no problem handing it over." She smiled faintly. "If I did that now, you'd never hear the rest of the story, and you need to hear it." Rian studied her for a moment longer. There was no fear in her eyes. Most spies, when cornered, looked for an exit, a way to slip past. She just stood there, steady as a stone, as if she had expected this meeting all along. Something about that unsettled him, more than if she had tried to run.